Hello, we are continuing with page 6, and we are an example of an income statement of financial performance, not position. So following balances were taken from Monty Limited, December 31st, so here's a whole bunch of accounts. Total effective tax rate on all items is 20%. We want a multi-step statement of financial showing expenses by function, so that's selling, admin, and assume the expenses have already been, otherwise you'd have to break them down. And you can review your text from last year to figure out how to break them down if you do find a question with the breakdown. Because we kind of, as we build onto these courses, we kind of assume that you remember your stuff from last year, or you look it up and relearn it. I do try and give overall kind of the material, but for specific things like that, that's kind of up to you. Also, I want to apologize in this video and the last two videos. Our dogs have been, I have 2 labs, and they just sometimes get too hot and all you hear is them breathing. So that's not me struggling for breath, it was my dogs. If you heard it, they're happily laying in the same room. Okay, so let's talk about some of these accounts and then let you pause it, do the question, and then we'll come back and look at the answers. Income. Does that get separated out, or does it just go with all the doing op stuff from operations? Well, we said it's finance, so separate it. So it's going to go in other revenue. How about cash? Is that on the income statement? No, it's on the balance sheet. Sales revenue? Yep, that goes with sales. Accounts receivable? Nope, balance sheet. Prepaid insurance. Well, that sounds like an expense. Sometimes they're called prepaid insurance expense. So does that go on the income? No, it's an asset. So no. Returns and allowances? Yep. Allowance for doubtful accounts? No. Sales discounts? Yep. Land? No. Equipment? No. Building? No. Cost of goods sold? Yes. Now what about accumulated depreciation? That's the one on the balance sheet, and it's accumulated, so for all the years together, ever since you own the equipment or the buildings. So that's on the balance sheet, so we don't want that. BS's balance sheet. Notes receivable? Nope, it's an asset. These are contra assets. Selling expenses? Yes. Accounts payable? No, it's a liability. Bonds payable? No, it's a liability. Administrative expenses? Yes. Accrued liabilities? Nope. Each of these and all the assets, like prepaid insurance or accounts receivable, will already have the amount in revenue. Because if I sold something, so sales on account, I'd have a debit to account, credit to sales. So it would be repeated twice if I tried to put both on. Interest expense, again, we separate. Other expenses. Notes payable, nope, it's a liability. Loss, other due to storm damage. Yep, that's other expenses. And depreciation expense, definitely. So, I want you to put a multiple step statement of financial position. Or performance, I'm just going to call it an income statement. Why they call them the same thing? Statement of finance, I don't know. Anyway, showing expenses by function, so selling and admin. And I want you to do the multi-step statement. So pause and go ahead and look back at the template if you want on page 4. I suggest you try it first without the template, or if you use the template first, check your answer, and then do the question again, maybe tomorrow or the next day, so that you have practice at it. Okay, so put it on pause and come back when you want to see the solution. And I'll go through it in the same video. Okay, so I'm assuming you have all now finished your statement and you've come here to see what the solution's like. So at the top, you're going to have sales revenue minus cost of goods sold is gross profit. The only difference you had to figure out, and again, you could have reviewed the template and last year's notes, we had sales returns and allowances and sales discounts. So those have to be separated and deducted from sales. So separate those and deduct from sales. Now, could you have just started with net sales? Yes. If you do that on Wiley Plus, ending that it's marking this part wrong, the net sales, they probably want you to separate it. Okay? But you could have started from net sales. Sometimes they just give you net sales, they don't give you this, but I wanted to show you how to take it off. Okay, then we take off cost of goods sold. Sometimes it's called cost of sales. And we end up with gross profit. Now, we have operating expenses by function. So we have selling expenses, admin expenses, and depreciation expense is going to be listed by itself as well. Now, selling expense, admin expense, depreciation expense. Now, sometimes these are split into those. If they want it separate, they'll just give you one depreciation expense. If they want you to put it into its parts, it might say 40% of depreciation expense is selling, relates to selling. Then you take 40% and put it up here, and 60% and put it here. Okay? So totally depends on the question. So after our operating expense, we have operating income. But now we've got to deal with those the incidental transactions, the things that don't really have to do with our main business, which is obviously selling something. So we have our other revenues and gains and other expenses and losses. Just ignore this for a second. Now, as I said, you can combine these, but you don't have to. I like separating them out just for students' sake. It keeps it in your mind that these are added and these are subtracted, right? So these are both negative. Because sometimes students, when they lump them all together, they forget which is positive and negative, and they end up adding them all or subtracting them all. So that'll leave you with the wrong number. Just forget this red for a second, I'll explain it in a sec. So, that gets you income before tax. We calculate our income tax expense, and then we get net income after tax. Remember to take off income tax expense. And then we'd have discontinued if we needed to, then net income, then OCI and CI. So if there was discontinued ops, you would call this continuing ops before tax or continuing ops after tax. Then your net income would be down here. And then of course you list EPS at the end. of the statement. So, just in case you need to, pause it. If you ran out of time, here's half of the statement, and you can just pause your video, and here's the bottom half. So that's what your multi-step statement should have looked like. So I hope and I hope it made sense to you. Okay, so I'm going to end this video and go on to part B in the next one.